What happens when a comedy legend, a living icon, steps onto a morning show stage, only to be met with a host armed with a pointed agenda? From the very moment Eddie Murphy entered the studio, the air was electric. But no one, absolutely no one, was ready for the collision course that would unfold between him and Joy Behar. This wasn't just a celebrity interview gone sideways. It was a high-stakes lesson in how quickly a conversation can explode when professional respect takes a backseat. Before we dive into this unforgettable moment, hit that subscribe button and drop your thoughts in the comments. Trust me, you'll want to unpack this with everyone. Eddie walked into the studio with that signature grin, extending his hand with the polished confidence of someone who has dominated Hollywood for over 4 decades. Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and the rest of the panel greeted him like royalty, their excitement palpable. "We've been waiting for this all week," Whoopi exclaimed, beaming. But behind the smiles, a different kind of anticipation was brewing, one Eddie was about to confront head-on. The interview started like a masterclass in charm and professionalism. Eddie's trademark humor and infectious energy captivated both the hosts and the live audience as he shared stories from behind the scenes. Each anecdote was a perfect blend of wit and respect for his craft. "After all these years," Eddie said, eyes sparkling under the studio lights, "I still feel that spark. There's something magical about creating something that moves people, that gives them a moment of escape." Sarah Haynes leaned in, nodding in agreement. "That integrity is what shines through in your work. You've connected with so many generations." Eddie responded thoughtfully, his voice steady but heartfelt. "Comedy speaks a universal language. People need to laugh. If I can give them that release, that moment of joy, then I have done my part." But then the tone shifted. Joy Behar, who had been quietly observing, suddenly leaned forward, her carefully composed expression masking a more calculating intent. "Speaking of comedy," she interjected, her voice slicing through the warmth of the conversation, "don't you think some of your past work might be considered deeply problematic by today's standards?" The studio seemed to freeze. Eddie's smile remained, but it tightened, a subtle crack in his otherwise unshakable composure. The other hosts exchanged nervous glances. Joy was steering the conversation into dangerous territory. "I'm not sure I follow," Eddie replied, calm and measured, even as the floor shifted beneath him. But Joy pressed on, eyes glinting with the thrill of confrontation. "Your old stand-up jokes, many now labeled offensive. Don't you owe your audience an apology?" Whoopi tried to intervene gently, offering a lifeline. "Perhaps we could focus on Eddie's new project." But Joy was relentless. "No," she declared, voice dripping with self-righteous conviction. "This is a vital conversation. In today's era of accountability, shouldn't public figures answer for their past?" Eddie's posture stiffened. The easygoing entertainer was gone, replaced by a man defending a lifetime of work. "Let me be perfectly clear, Joy," he said, voice firm. "I've been in comedy for over 40 years. My job is to push boundaries, but at whose expense?" Joy fired back, volume rising. "Those boundaries hurt people." Eddie's tone remained even, but steel edged his words. "Comedy is a mirror to society. If we start erasing art based on shifting social opinions, where does it end?" Joy leaned back, smirking, confident she had him cornered. "So you have zero regrets?" "I stand by my body of work," Eddie declared, unwavering. "I've evolved, as we all do, but I will not apologize for being a part of the history of comedy." The studio held its breath. The audience was stunned, watching what felt like a public trial. The other hosts were powerless, caught between admiration and the unfolding storm. "That's a very convenient way to sidestep responsibility," Joy sneered, contempt dripping from her words. Eddie's jaw tightened. The tension was palpable, an unforgettable showdown between legend and critic, comedy and accountability. "Convenient? You think it's convenient to be ambushed on national television? To have my entire life's work twisted into a narrative you wrote before I even sat down? Joy shot back, attempting a weak defense, but it was obvious she was enjoying the spectacle. No, Eddie said, his voice now commanding the room. The power dynamic shifted instantly. You're leveling accusations. Do you hold every comedian to this retroactive standard, or is it just the one sitting in this chair today? The other hosts froze, caught between loyalty and disbelief. Eddie wasn't done. He leaned in, locking his gaze on Joy. Let me ask you something. In your long career, have you ever said a single thing someone might find offensive? Told a joke that didn't quite land years later? If we're opening these books for public scrutiny, shouldn't every single page be examined? Wouldn't you agree? Joy's face turned crimson. She had clearly never expected her own weapon to be turned on her with such precision. The smug mask of superiority shattered, replaced by raw, cornered fury. That is entirely different, Joyce, she stammered, flustered as her own rigid standards came back to haunt her. My work has never been the kind of material you've produced. Is that a fact? Eddie countered, one eyebrow arching theatrically. So you're saying you've never, not once, cracked a joke about someone's looks, where they come from, or what they believe? Never uttered a word that could bruise an ego or make someone feel out of place? Whoopi lunged back into the fray, sensing the conversation was a runaway train. Maybe we should take a breath. Remember, we're supposed to be on the same side here. But Eddie was just warming up. No, Whoopi. This is exactly the reckoning we need. This spectacle perfectly exposes the poisonous double standard strangling any chance for real conversation today. Double standards? Joy scoffed, her voice thick with indignation. I think you're being a touch theatrical, Eddie. Theatrical? Eddie barked a laugh, cold and void of warmth. Joy, you set a televised ambush demanding I prostrate myself for my entire life's work. And you have the nerve to call me dramatic for pointing out your hypocrisy? The studio fell silent. The audience was captivated, witnessing a confrontation so raw it felt forbidden, like it belonged behind closed doors. This was no longer daytime TV chaos. This was a bare-knuckle clash of titanic egos with irreconcilable worldviews. I was not ambushing you, Joy insisted, though the defensiveness in her voice betrayed her. I was posing legitimate questions about accountability and entertainment. Legitimate? Eddie's voice rose, steel and composure straining under her relentless siege. You walked onto the set with a script designed to make me the villain. And now you're twisting reality to gaslight me into believing this is some noble journalistic pursuit. Sarah Haynes made a final, valiant attempt to steer the conversation back to sanity. I believe the core issue we're exploring is how an artist can mature while still respecting their body of work. Eddie softened, nodding toward her. Thank you, Sarah. That is authentic growth. It's not about torching your history or pretending it never happened. It's about learning from your journey and continuing to build from a place of truth. But Joy was relentless. Authenticity is no shield against harm, Eddie. Words carry weight. Public figures must answer for the pain they cause. And there it is, Eddie said, frustration and disappointment etched into every syllable. The baseline assumption that the very purpose of comedy is to inflict injury. The studio was frozen again, caught between the thunder of his words and the intensity of the standoff. What started as a morning show interview had become a masterclass in confrontation, ethics, and the fine line between accountability and hypocrisy. Do you even have a fundamental grasp of what comedy is, Joy? Its role, its vital function in society? Eddie's voice cut through the thick tension, sharp and unyielding. I understand comedy can isolate people, perpetuate harmful stereotypes, Joy fired back, regaining confidence as she retreated to the safety of her social justice script. Eddie's eyes narrowed, his tone cutting with precision. It can also be a scalpel to dissect the powerful, a megaphone to call out institutions, a lifeline to help people find laughter in the darkest of times. But I suppose that version doesn't quite fit the neat little box you've built for me, does it? The other hosts exchanged frantic, desperate glances, searching for any escape from the spiraling storm. Finally, Whoopi Goldberg stepped in, her voice calm but commanding. All right, listen, both of you. We're professionals here. We should be able to disagree without trying to dismantle one another. Sarah quickly nodded in agreement. There has to be space for multiple viewpoints on this. But Joy, unable to resist a final jab, leaned forward. I simply believe that when your platform is as vast as yours, you bear a profound responsibility to wield it with care. That was the spark. Eddie had reached his limit. His eyes locked on her, voice low but burning with controlled fury. A responsibility to whom, Joy? To you? To some faceless committee that dictates what's permissible this week? Or to the millions who've championed my work for 40 years? Society, Joy declared pompously, oblivious to the arrogance of her own words. Society? Eddie's voice thundered. You actually believe you are the voice of society? That your narrow checklist of what's proper speaks for hundreds of millions of people? I speak for anyone who values basic human decency, Joy shot back, clinging to her crumbling moral high ground. Basic human decency? Eddie's volume rose with each syllable. Is it basic decency to ambush a guest on national television? To caricature a person's life's work, stripping away all context and nuance? To demand an apology for art created decades ago in a completely different cultural universe? Joy's face burned scarlet, rage and shock mixing in equal measure. I will not sit here and be browbeaten by someone who built a fortune on offensive trash, and I will not sit here while someone lured me under a false flag. Eddie leaned forward, eyes burning, voice controlled but lethal. Did you honestly think I'd sit here meekly while you tried to demolish my legacy? Did you think I'd smile and play along while you tried to shrink my entire career to fit your personal grievances? The studio was electric. Other hosts stared wide-eyed, powerless as the interview turned into a volcanic eruption of conflict. The audience sat frozen, witnessing a level of confrontation unseen in the polished world of daytime TV. This is exactly the kind of hostility I was talking about, Joy stammered, scrambling to reclaim the moral high ground. Hostility? Eddie's laugh was razor-sharp. Joy, you spent 10 minutes relentlessly attacking me, my work, and my character, and you dare call me hostile for defending myself? The audacity is staggering. Whoopi made one last desperate attempt to restore order. All right, let's take a collective breath and remember why we're here, to discuss important issues. But Eddie had passed diplomacy. This was no longer a debate. It was a character assassination masquerading as social commentary. The gloves weren't off. They had been thrown to the floor. And Joy Behar was about to realize, in front of a national audience, that she had picked the wrong titan to humiliate. Eddie rose from his chair, every movement deliberate, his eyes blazing with a fire that sent chills through the studio. The tension shifted from strain to palpable alarm as one of Hollywood's greatest legends reached the breaking point. You know something, Joy? Eddie's voice dropped into a low, dangerous register, a quiet rumble that carried far more weight than all the shouting before it. I've survived this industry for over 40 years. I've faced critics, detractors, and people who wanted nothing more than to see me fall. But never have I encountered the sheer audacity of someone inviting me onto their stage just to spring a self-righteous trap like this. For the first time, Joy shifted uncomfortably in her seat. A flicker of genuine panic crossed her face as it dawned on her that she had pushed far too hard, Eddie, I think you're overreacting to some simple questions. Simple questions? Eddie's voice exploded across the set, sharp enough to make crew members flinch. Simple questions? You call systematically tearing apart my life's work simple questions? You call demanding an apology for bringing laughter to millions simple questions? Lady, you wouldn't recognize a simple question if it wore a name tag and shook your hand. Behind the cameras, producers waved frantically, signaling for a commercial break. But this confrontation was a runaway train, far too fast and powerful to stop. I was trying to have a meaningful dialogue about accountability, Joy said quietly now, her earlier confidence completely shattered. Meaningful dialogue? Eddie scoffed, the sound bitter and stripped of all warmth. Joy, you wouldn't know meaningful dialogue if it were projected on a screen with step-by-step instructions. What you wanted was cheap points, ambushing a guest you assumed would just sit here and take it. Whoopi stood up, realizing this had gone far beyond a typical talk show clash. Eddie, maybe we should all calm down for a moment. No, Whoopi, Eddie shot back, turning briefly toward her before locking eyes on Joy again. His fury was controlled but relentless. I'm done being told to calm down. I'm done pretending this kind of ambush journalism is acceptable. And I'm done watching people like Joy hijack every conversation to lecture shame and virtue signal instead of engaging with a single real idea. He pivoted back to Joy, who now looked genuinely shaken. You want to talk about harm? Let's talk about the harm you just caused with this performance. You took what should have been a celebration of creativity and twisted it into a venomous interrogation. You showed millions of people that honest conversation is impossible when one side comes in with a premeditated agenda to destroy the other. I never intended to destroy you, Joy protested weakly. Really? Eddie replied, acid dripping from every word. Then what do you call this? 15 minutes of assassinating my character, my work, and my integrity. Demanding I repent for comedy that brought joy to the world? If that's not an attempted takedown, I'd love to hear what you consider a friendly chat. Sarah Haynes made one final attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. I think there may have been a breakdown in communication here. There was no breakdown, Sarah, Eddie said, his tone softening briefly toward her before snapping back to razor sharp. This was deliberate, calculated. Joy knew exactly what she was doing when she wrote those questions. She knew the fire she was trying to start. Her only mistake was thinking I'd sit here and let myself burn. Joy made one last desperate grab for control. I think you're being paranoid, Eddie. Not everything is a plot against you. That was it. Eddie's eyes widened as a wave of incandescent fury surged through him, shocking even himself. Paranoid? He roared, his voice becoming a physical force that swallowed the room. Paranoid? You've spent 20 minutes trying to dismantle everything I've built over a lifetime, and you have the nerve to call me paranoid for noticing? The studio stood frozen, the air thick with disbelief. What began as a daytime interview had transformed into a moment no one would forget. A collision between power, pride, and a legend who refused to be publicly dismantled. Did you really think gaslighting me on national television would work? That I would doubt my own reality just because you demanded it? Eddie's voice cut through the studio like lightning. The audience sat utterly still, captivated by the raw, unfiltered intensity radiating from an icon they had revered for decades. This wasn't a celebrity tantrum. It was a master of his craft, a cultural giant defending his entire legacy against someone who had gravely underestimated both his intellect and his backbone. This, Eddie continued, his voice heavy with decades of experience and authority, is the entire problem with people like you, Joy. You think you can say anything, attack anyone, and then when they respond with the anger you've earned, you simply label them paranoid, dramatic, or overreacting. Well, I have news for you. That tired old playbook has no power over me. Joy sat frozen, stunned into silence, unable to summon a response to the verbal storm she had unleashed. Do you know the real tragedy here, Joy? Eddie's voice lowered, but the intensity burned brighter than ever. A legend sat before you, a man who has spent 4 decades perfecting the art of comedy, the science of entertainment, the soul of connecting with an audience. You had the chance to probe the mind of a master to discuss the alchemy of humor, and instead you chose a political witch hunt. That is the only weapon in your arsenal. He let the words hang, eyes locking onto the camera, speaking to the millions watching. And that, he said, his voice slicing through the silence, is more offensive than any joke I've ever told. The studio descended into a heavy, deafening silence. Every face frozen, every breath held. After a moment that seemed to stretch forever, Whoopi cleared her throat, a tiny ripple in the tense air. Well, this has certainly been an intense conversation, she offered, though even her voice trembled with the weight of what had just occurred. Eddie scanned the set one final time, the inferno of his anger beginning to fade, leaving only the glowing embers of disappointment. It didn't have to be, Whoopi. It really didn't have to be. With that, he turned and walked off the stage, leaving behind a stunned audience, a panel of shell-shocked hosts, and one utterly dismantled Joy Behar, who had just learned a devastating lesson about trying to trap a lion. If this display of unshakable confidence and mastery captivated you, don't forget to subscribe and join the conversation in the comments. Ask yourself, what was Joy Behar's true motive in launching this calculated attack on the legacy of Eddie Murphy?